Welcome to the mock hearing portion of today's training. I am Amber Lammers, the Director of Investigations in Mizzou's Office of Institutional Equity. I am unable to attend the event today, but you will see me playing the role of hearing officer in the mock hearing that you're about to watch. First, a brief introduction. You received copies of the investigative report and exhibits. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review those materials, as today's mock hearing is based on that scenario. All the characters in today's mock hearing, including the panelists, parties and witness, and advisors, are part of the OIE team at Mizzou. It is important to note that this is not a real case. We have drawn on our experiences and common themes from real incidents reported to our office, but this is a work of fiction, including the names and locations and specific set of facts. Our goal is to provide a realistic example of the types of cases you may encounter as a panelist, including the tough policy questions you'll need to decipher, like whether a complainant was incapacitated or not at the time of sexual activity, and/or was there consent to the sexual activity. This fake case is under Title IX policy, meaning that there is live cross-examination between the advisors and opposing parties. As you know, in the equity side of things, for example, if this same scenario occurred off campus, the procedure would have some key differences. In those cases, questions would go through the hearing panel instead of direct cross-examination. You'll notice that the recording starts with this Title IX hearing in progress. For the sake of time, so we could show you more questions and substantive exchange within the hearing, we omitted the hearing officer's opening dialogue. You have received a copy of the script or outline that hearing officers, or in equity referred to as hearing panel chairs, use to have everyone introduce themselves, go over ground rules, acknowledge that the parties received notice and relevant materials for the case, all of those introductory matters. There are several items of business included in that opening. In real life, if you are a hearing panel chair, it is best to review the script, including that whole opening, to get as comfortable as possible before the hearing. But for today, we will jump right in and start with the complainant statement. We'll essentially pick up after those introductory portions have concluded. If you'd like to follow along, skip to that page of the script now to the complainant statement. And I recommend taking notes as we go so you don't forget questions or items to discuss after the mock hearing ends. There will be specific time to do that. Thanks again for your service. Here we go. We are back on the record at 1:08 p.m. Please start the recording. Now we have concluded the introductory matters and logistics for the hearing today. We are ready to proceed with participant statements and questions. We will hear from the parties and any other witnesses present in this case. We ask that you answer truthfully and abide by the university's principles of respect, discovery, excellence, and responsibility. First, the complainant, Aubrey Palmer, will present and be given an opportunity to make a statement. Then the hearing panel may ask questions, followed by cross-examination by the advisor of the respondent. There will be a break after the hearing panel asks questions so that the respondent may confer with his advisor. Are there any questions before we proceed? Seeing none. Aubrey, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead with your statement.
When I met Philip at Math Club in August of 2021, I was so excited to make a new friend. And not just a new friend, but somebody who had something in common with me. We were both math majors, we had classes together. I'm really introverted and I have a hard time making friends. So it was amazing how easy and natural that friendship between Philip and myself felt. Between meeting each other in August and April, we hung out regularly, meeting up for dinner, watching movies and TV shows together. And I always thought that Philip and I were on the same page about our friendship. I mean, we never kissed, we never had sex, we never even discussed any of that or discussed being anything more than friends. I didn't want to be anything more than friends. But on April 2nd, Philip took advantage of our close friendship by having sex with me without my consent when I was blacked out after drinking and consuming an edible. blacking out is a scary experience on its own, but waking up naked to someone having sex with you and no recollection of how you got there is absolutely horrifying. I remember telling Philip no when he asked if he should get a condom, and I meant no to everything. And despite saying no, Philip continued to have sex with me. At no time was I trying to escalate my relationship with Philip or move beyond being friends. Philip made assumptions about our relationship. And if he had ever talked with me about his feelings, I would have been able to tell him that I didn't want to be anything more than friends with him. I did not consent to having sex with him, regardless of any feelings or misconceptions about the nature of our relationship. And that is what is most important. I did not consent. I could not consent. Thank you for being here today to hear my story. I hope that you'll find Philip responsible for violating policies for his actions on the night of April 2nd. And I'm glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aubrey. Next up, we have questions from the hearing panel. Liz or Foster, would one of you like to start?
I can. So I remember you saying something along the lines of, being undressed. Can you go into details or recall anything after some time now about how you became undressed?
I don't remember any of that. I remember being on the couch and watching TV and drinking some of that wine that we had poured in the solo cups, but then I black out after that point. And my next memory, my next recollection is being undressed on top of Philip. So I don't have any memories of removing my clothing or who removed my clothing. None of that is anything that I'm able to remember. I just remember waking up and being undressed.
I think one of the text messages you shared with us was that you texted Philip that you were pre-gaming. And then at some point you made a statement to the investigator that he knew that you'd taken edibles. Do you recall how you communicated to Philip that you had taken edibles?
Yeah, I know when I texted him, I think all I said is that I was pre-gaming. I don't think I specifically told him what we were drinking. But when he showed up at my dorm room after he finished dinner, I remember when he came in, he had asked what we had been doing before. And I said, oh, I remember I told you I was pre-gaming. And I think I just mentioned pretty briefly that I had an edible. But I don't remember if I told him more about what it was or anything about the dosage or anything like that. I think it was just a quick mention oh, well, we drank a couple White Claws and I had an edible. I don't think I went any further into that and explaining.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. Foster?
All right, no more from Foster. A quick tech question. Is anyone else hearing kind of a fuzzy noise? Low a little bit? Okay. Let me know if you keep hearing it and we can troubleshoot. But I think everything has been audible so far. Okay. I believe I have a few questions if that is okay, if we're ready to keep going. Aubrey, can you talk with us about what your expectations were for what you and Philip would be doing that night once you had decided to stay in?
Yeah, so Philip and I had been talking about watching this show in previous conversations. It was this historical fiction show. So I know we had talked about watching that together. And that was kind of what we discussed when Philip arrived over at my dorm. We had these plans, or at least had kind of talked about maybe going to that drag show with my friend Steven. But then when Philip arrived, we decided we weren't going to do that. And since we had already discussed watching the show, we decided that we would just do that. It was something we'd already talked about and had wanted to do. And that's really what I thought we would be doing. I was okay with drinking a little bit. That's not something that would be unusual if we're just hanging out. But I just thought that we would maybe just have a little bit of wine and watch the show. And then, maybe after a couple episodes, Philip would go home. mean, we had not done anything like what ended up happening at any time before this. So I didn't really have any expectations that it would be any different than any other time we hung out.
Had you or Philip spent the night in the other's room before?
We had not. We had hung out, and I mean, wouldn't be unusual to hang out like late at night. I mean, I feel like lots of like people do that in college, especially. It's really easy to lose track of time, and all of a sudden it's 3 a.m. But we had not spent the night or done anything like that before. That was something that I had not anticipated happening.
Okay. You talked a bit about this, but in the conversation you had about whether or not to go to the drag show or stay in, did you feel pressure to stay or go? Were you okay not going? Kind of what, can you walk us through your mental processes?
I wouldn't say that Philip pressured me at all into staying in or not going to the drag show. I think it was like a pretty mutual decision. I'd already waited a little bit for Philip to come over because he had been out at dinner, and Steven, my other friend, was already gone. And so I don't think there was any pressure at all. I mean, I think just kind of based on how everything happened, it just made sense. We were already there, and things had already really kind of got started over at the drag show. So I think it just made sense for us to stay in and hang out. And it wasn't unusual at all for us to do that either. So I didn't feel pressured. I didn't think it was out of the ordinary or anything like that.
Okay. You talked a bit also about your relationship with Philip. You said that you were friends. Did you have any sense at any point that he may have felt differently, that his feelings may have changed, or romantic feelings may have evolved for him?
I really didn't. I didn't. I had no idea. I know from reading the report that I think maybe that's something Philip had discussed with some of our other friends, but that's not something Philip had discussed with me. And I actually think that's like a really huge deal in all of this, because I would have had the opportunity to make it clear to Philip that I wasn't interested in him romantically if he had ever talked with me about his feelings towards me. But I never got that opportunity because it's not something that he had mentioned. Nobody else ever told me that Philip had said anything about feeling that way about me. So I didn't even have an opportunity to ever address it, which I feel like could have made a huge difference on this night.
Okay. In your experience, how long does it take to feel the effects of an edible? So I know at one point in the investigative report, you had talked about that it takes a while to kick in. And when we're looking at the timeline of that evening, I would say maybe my question is twofold. In this experience, on the night of this incident, how long did it take before you were feeling those effects? And was that, kind of as a second part, was that a typical time frame based on your previous experiences?
I have only tried edibles like 3 or 4 times before this night, like not like a regular user, but enough that I felt confident in like knowing how it would affect me. Although I had not ever had alcohol and edibles together, so I guess that could have made a difference as well. But I would say typically it takes like at least an hour before I would feel the effects. And that was, I think, consistent on this night. Really, before I started to feel the effect of the edible kick in was probably at least an hour. And that was consistent with like other times that I had tried them before.
Is it fair to say that based on that kind of time frame that Philip had arrived at your room before you were feeling the effects, or after? Where would you put that?
Maybe around pretty close in time, I think, to when he arrived. I don't remember exactly when it was when I really started to feel it, but I know it was not long after he came over when I like kind of sat down, and it was really when I just started to feel kind of, I don't know how else to describe it other than loose. Like my movements felt really loose. I didn't feel like I had quite as much control over my body. I don't know that I could say exactly what time, but I would say it was either right around the same time that he arrived or pretty shortly after when I really started to be able to feel that.
Did you talk to Philip about how you were feeling?
No, I don't ever I don't remember specifically mentioning feeling that way. I thought it was something that Philip noticed because I remember him like making a comment or saying "whoa" or something when I sat down. Kind of that moment where I remember feeling like I wasn't having quite as much control over my body. But I don't know that I specifically said anything to Philip about how I was feeling physically.
Okay. Can you tell us a bit about the impact that this incident has had on you?
Yeah, it's been really hard. I mean, from the next morning, waking up. I mean, I woke up and it was just really disorienting to wake up naked next to somebody you don't know. And I remember going to take a shower. I just, as I told the investigator, I felt unclean, like I was dirty. I didn't know what had happened to me. And it was really isolating feeling. I did text my friend Macy at that time, but even in that conversation with Macy, I found it really hard to describe what had happened. I feel like kind of moving forward, it's been hard to focus on school and on classes. This is just kind of constantly what I do remember is replaying in my head. It's made it really hard to move forward and take care of those responsibilities when that's something that I'm always thinking about. It's made me really hesitant to, make new friendships. I don't want there to be this kind of misunderstanding of or assumptions made about me having romantic feelings for somebody. It's caused me to be more withdrawn. I mean, I don't feel like I've spent as much time with my friends recently or that I've wanted to be involved in some of the things that I do here on campus. It's really just kind of had an effect on everything that I've done. And it's been hard to deal with moving forward. I'm trying my best and I've got some really good support systems, but it doesn't really take away from what happened.
Okay, thank you. Those are all of the questions that I have. I think it might be a good time to take a break, let the panelists consult to make sure that we don't have any additional questions. If we could stop the recording and send everyone to their breakout rooms. Okay, we are back on the record at 1:31. The panel met and discussed to see if we had any additional questions. We do not have any more questions at this time for the complainant, so we will move on to cross-examination by the respondent's advisor. Mindy, are you ready?
I am.
Okay, and Aubrey, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. You can go ahead.
Aubrey, can you confirm for us that evening or that night, the alcohol consumption when you were hanging out with Philip was typical?
Yeah. I mean, that's not a lot more than I would drink. I mean, on a normal night, I don't think I would say that it's a small amount of alcohol, but it was not like out of the normal range of how much I would consume.
Okay. And some of the actions that have been described when you were characterized as being drunk included maybe giggling more, being louder, laughing, things of that nature. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And you had said in your statement that Philip knew that you were drunk. And would you characterize that based on your engagement and being giggly and laughing?
Yeah, yeah, Philip we'd like been around and drink before. It's not the first time he'd like seen me after drinking. And I would say that's typically how I act when I start to get to that point where I'm drunk. And that was consistent with other times that we'd hung out.
Okay. How would he have known that you were incapacitated?
It's hard for me to say because I was blacked out. So in some ways I can't tell you some of the ways that I was acting. I mean, I've described like what I was doing prior to blacking out. but I do remember like when the kind of brief moments like in waking up in between like waking up to the sexual activity. I know that I felt really unsteady, and kind of dizzy and like physically ill, and I think those are all things somebody would have been able to notice. But obviously, because I was blacked out, I can't specifically say everything that I was doing during that time. I mean, Philip talks about me touching his, like stretching out my legs on the futon. I don't remember any of that. So I don't know how I can answer that question other than saying, like, I know what I was doing prior to blacking out. And I can't tell you the other things in between.
Okay. When you described kind of coming to and you were on top of Philip, how did you get to be on top of Philip in that time?
I don't know. I was blacked out. I don't have a recollection of that.
And when you came to, what was happening in that moment?
It was pretty fuzzy. Like what I do remember, I know that like when I first woke up, I was on top of him. Like he was lying on his back on the bed, and I was like straddling him. And I remember I had my hands on his chest at that time, and I remember doing that, or at least feeling that I needed to do that to keep myself balanced. Like I felt really dizzy, and I remember I was really confused just because I didn't remember anything leading up to that. So I didn't know how my clothing had got removed, how we even got to the bed, because the last thing I remember was being on the futon. So I know that after that, that I remember that kind of went on for a few seconds, and then I laid down, or I guess I kind of fell onto the bed next to him. And I say kind of fell because I remember not really having like a lot of control over my body as I was getting off of the top of him. And I remember telling him that I didn't feel well, or that I felt sick, and that I wanted to sleep. So that's kind of what I remember happening after I do kind of wake up.
And when you did wake up, come to, were you engaged in intercourse at that time?
Yeah, when I woke up, yes, he did have his penis inserted.
How would he have known that you weren't consenting by being on top of him, engaged in intercourse?
I don't have any recollection of what happened prior to waking up.
Okay. When you sort of stopped, fell to the side in that moment, and said, and you in your statement and what you're saying now is that you told him that you felt sick and wanted to sleep. Where during that correspondence, where were the two, how were the two of you positioned?
At that point in time, I was next to him. Like I had gotten off the top of him and had kind of fallen next to him on my, like I was laying kind of on my back, and then I rolled over away from him towards the wall. And then I remember I was just laying on my side and I had my eyes closed. It felt a lot like everything was spinning, and I felt kind of nauseous.
When you were telling him that you felt sick and you wanted to sleep, where were you positioned in that moment?
Then I was laying on my back, I believe, because I remember pulling the blanket up and then turning to the wall on the side. So at that point in time, I had kind of like fell hard next to him, like onto my back.
Where was he positioned when you were making these statements?
He was also on the bed. Like he was still laying on his back. He hadn't moved.
Okay. So the two of you were laying on your back when you said that?
Yes.
Okay. Given how you've described your level of intoxication, can you be 100% certain that you said out loud to Philip that you felt sick and wanted to sleep?
I'm really certain that I told him I felt sick and that I wanted to sleep.
Okay. And then during this next piece where you had rolled over by this point in your statement, and you state that he asked to wear a condom and you said no, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How would the respondent know that when you said no to wearing a condom, you were saying no to further sexual activity?
I had already told him that I felt sick and I wanted to sleep. So I think that on its own should have been pretty clear enough that I didn't want to continue or I didn't want to have sex with him. So when he asked if I wanted him to get a condom, I said no. I just told him I felt sick and I wanted to sleep. So I thought it was pretty clear that I wanted to stop.
But your no answer was to the question of, should I get a condom?
Well, that's the next thing that he said. Like I told him that I felt sick and I wanted to go to sleep, and then he didn't. I don't think he said anything else after that. And I think the next thing is that that is when he asked if he should get a condom.
I don't think I have any other questions.
Okay. Do you need a moment to consult with the respondent, or does anybody else need a break?
I would like a minute to consult with.
Okay. Okay, I think it's a good time for a break. We will reconvene in, let's say, 10 minutes. So we can stop the recording at 1:40 p.m. Okay, we are back on the record at 1:42. We just concluded cross-examination by the respondent's advisor. Next up will be witnesses for the complainant. Aubrey, do you have any witnesses that you wish to call?
Yeah, I would like to call witness Stephen Smithton.
Okay, and I believe Stephen Smithton is in a breakout room, so we will have Heidi go in and let Stephen know that we're ready. So we'll have another brief pause and then Stephen will join us. It is 1:43 and we'll be back shortly. Okay, we are back on the record. You can start the recording. It is 1:48 and we have Stephen Smithton, witness, in the Zoom now with us. Stephen, can you see and hear clearly?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you for being here.
Mhm.
Okay, so first up will be some questions by Aubrey's advisor, Julia. Followed by Julia's questions will be any questions from the panel, and then any questions from the respondent or Philip's advisor, Mindy. So that's an overview of where we're going. Julia, are you ready? And do you have any questions for Stephen?
Yes, I do. Hi, Stephen. Thank you for participating today. I just had a couple of questions looking at your statement. The first is, you mentioned that you and Palmer, at one point when you were together on the evening in question, each consumed an edible. Do you recall about what time that might have occurred?
I think it was, well, I left around 8:45 and it was pretty close to that before I left when we did that. We had some drinks before that.
Okay. And just to confirm, I think you described this a little bit in your statement, but do you recall at any time Palmer discussing with you any type of intention or desire to have any type of romantic relationship with Philip?
No, that's not something we chatted about, that she was interested in him romantically. When we're together, I spend a lot of time talking about myself. So yeah, I don't recall Aubrey sharing any desire to be with Philip.
Them together, did you ever observe her touch that might be kind of flirty or that might send a signal that she was interested in him romantically?
No,
Julia, I think you cut out a little bit. I think it froze up a couple of times. Will you repeat the question just so we get the whole thing on the record?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Stephen, I was just curious if when you have been around Palmer and Philip, if you ever observed Palmer touch Philip in a way that seemed kind of flirty, or that might give a signal that she was interested in something more than just being platonic friends.
We haven't really been together in that small setting. But I'm not aware of any moves that Aubrey's made to signal anything romantic to Philip.
Okay, well, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Do the other panelists have any questions for Stephen? No for Liz Foster?
Do have a question. You said
ahead.
what time frame she told you? Like, was it immediately after, Aubrey stated that she had gone to the bathroom when she contacted the other individual, or what time frame?
When she told me what? I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
When she told you what had happened to her.
Oh, it was later on. I don't recollect specifically, but it wasn't. Philip was long gone from that.
Thank you.
So Philip, I think I just have, I'm sorry, not Philip, Stephen. I think I just have just a question or two. At the time that you left Aubrey's room, how would you describe her demeanor? What was she saying? How was she acting? Can you give us your account of what was going on at that time?
Yeah, so I think I was starting to say that she was giggly, and we talk about as she gets, so she was kind of there, but more talkative, but wasn't, was starting to get chatty with me, but I also was getting ready to leave, and so I think we were realizing we're just departing, but she wasn't slurring her words or anything like that, and so I could tell she was feeling something, but wasn't wasted or anything by that means, and I felt good and okay about leaving even though she was staying.
Okay. Did she seem concerned at all about Philip coming over? Like, what was her attitude about that?
She seemed excited about that. She still, so that even though I was going somewhere else, that she still had somebody to hang out with, because I know that that's important for her to feel like she's got somebody else to connect with, even if we were deciding to do different things. So she was excited about him coming over, just because she enjoys his company.
Okay. And I think one last question. You mentioned that you could tell she was feeling it when you left the room. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think overall she's pretty introverted, and especially in comparison to me. And so realizing that she was kind of keeping more pace with who was like bouncing back and forth and talking, versus me just talking and talking and talking. But she was just talking back, with me, more like bouncing back and forth, which just is, from as many times I've been around her this year, that's been a sign of that, she's feeling something, or can tell that she's been drinking. But again, she felt like, I don't know, I felt good leaving her and comfortable leaving her at the time when I headed out.
Okay, thank you. I do not have any other questions. Do my other panelists have any questions? Okay. Next would be any questions from Mindy, the respondent's advisor. Do you have any questions, or would you like a break?
I just have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Stephen, if you could confirm the last contact that you had with Aubrey that evening was via Snapchat.
Yes.
Okay. And during that exchange, did you have any concerns?
No, I didn't, because it was pretty like short snippets of communication, so I didn't have any concerns that made me feel like I needed to leave the drag show or anything.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, I think that is all of the questions we have. Stephen, we appreciate you joining us. You are welcome to step out now. All right, and we will take a brief break and reconvene in just a few minutes. Okay, we are back on the record at 2 o'clock. We just finished with witness Stephen Smithton. Aubrey, do you have any additional witnesses?
No, I do not.
Okay, no additional witnesses for the complainant. I do want to note for the record that there was a second witness in the investigative report, Macy White. She was interviewed as part of the investigation. She did not appear at today's hearing. Because she did not appear and submit to cross-examination, the hearing panel cannot rely on any statements that she made in reaching its determination of responsibility. The hearing panel will draw no inference one way or another from the fact that witness White did not come to the hearing today. We just will not consider any of her statements from the investigative report. Okay. Aubrey, do you have any additional evidence that you would like for the hearing panel to consider?
I don't have any additional evidence.
Okay. That concludes the section of the hearing for the complainant. We will turn next to the respondent. He'll be provided an opportunity to make a statement, and then we'll do a similar sequence of questions thereafter. Philip, are you ready, or would you like a break?
I would appreciate a quick break, please.
Sure. Okay. We will take, let's start with a 5-minute break, and then we'll assess from there. We can send everyone to their breakout rooms. Okay, we are back on the record at 2:09. We will next hear from Philip Beiser, the respondent in this case. He will be given an opportunity to make a statement. Then the hearing panel may ask questions of the respondent, followed by cross-examination of the respondent by the advisor of the complainant. There will be a break after the hearing panel asks questions so that the complainant may confer with her advisor. Are there any questions before we proceed? Seeing none. Okay, Philip, are you ready? Would you like to make a statement?
Yes, I am ready, and I have a short statement to share.
Okay, go ahead.
I would just like to say that, Aubrey and I thought we've known each other now since last August. And over the course of that time period, we had a wonderful friendship that I thought was just growing stronger and stronger towards hopefully a romantic relationship, which I thought was what happened on April 2nd. At no time, I would never take advantage of anyone at all, because I believe in consent is extremely important for any type of interaction with anyone else. I definitely would not take advantage of Aubrey in that way either. At no time did I think she was incapacitated or incapable of making a decision about engaging with sexual intercourse with me. My memory of that night was, until she reached out to me the following day, was a wonderful one. That I thought was a wonderful evening between two friends who were moving on to another level of the relationship through a consensual act. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Next would be questions from the hearing panel. Liz or Foster, would you like to start for us?
Would you like to start, or?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Before you went to Ms. Palmer's apartment that night, what was your expectation for that evening?
My expectation was that I was going over to her dorm room. I thought we probably would have some drinks. There was a question of whether we might go to a drag show downtown or just stay in. But hanging out with Aubrey was the only real expectation I had.
Okay. Had either of you had anything to drink or anything like that before you got together that night?
I hadn't had anything to drink, but I know Aubrey had some to drink before I got there when Stephen was there, her friend.
Just alcohol, anything else?
Now, I've read the report and she said she had a gummy, but she never mentioned that to me.
Okay. And you did not have anything else?
Not before I got there.
Okay. All right. Foster, do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you want to ask?
Yeah, and so previously you stated that you had helped each other, get undressed. Can you kind of explain and elaborate a little bit in more detail exactly kind of what that looked like on your end?
Yes. So like when it comes to undressing, initially I took off my shirt. Aubrey took off her shirt on her own, and we were there. That led to more kissing, and then we moved to the bedroom, her bedroom. There, we helped each other take off our pants, and it wasn't because neither of us couldn't do it. It's just sort of part of that sort of fun, playful engagement with each other. I think she, helped undo my belt, and I helped unbutton her jeans, and sort of helped her start pushing them down before stepping out of them, getting into bed. Then after we got in bed, that eventually led to the underwear coming off.
Thank you. I do have a few more questions. So, at what point in the sexual encounter did the complainant Palmer say no? And, what kind of context was that no in?
The only thing she said to me that night was no, and that was only after I asked her if I should put on a condom, and that was after we changed positions while having sexual intercourse. She had been on top of me, but then she laid down on the bed, and I was behind her. And I asked her, "Do you want me to put a condom on?" And she said no, very clearly, and then nothing else, and we continued having sex.
Thank you for your answer. One last question. And so, was that the only word that Aubrey, sorry, I'm so sorry, stated to you clearly during the encounter?
Yes.
Again, thank you for answering those questions.
Okay, Philip, I have a few additional questions. So you mentioned in one of your more recent answers, changing of positions after sexual activity had begun. Can you describe what it looked like from when the position changed from her being on top of you, and what happened from that point till when you asked the question about the condom in terms of your positioning relative to each other?
I can try. So she was on top of me, and then she moved, so she, lay down beside me. I mean, it would, we were side by side, and she turned to face away from me, like we're just doing another position. And does that answer your question?
It does. I'll have a couple of follow-up questions. So when she was on top of you, where were her hands?
They were on my chest, mainly.
Okay. How would you characterize, I guess, the level of control of her movement from that position to when she was laying next to you? So I think part of what was in the investigative report was that the complainant had stated that she felt dizzy and kind of fell onto the bed. What is your recollection of that moment?
I don't have the best recollection. I just remember her moving, and it wasn't a slow, gradual transition from on me to the bed next to me. I don't recall it act as if she just lost balance and just fell over. That was not what I remember happening.
Okay. And when you say that you don't remember or can't remember clearly, what would you attribute kind of the lack of memory to?
Well, again, she said she had that edible, and I don't know how that could have affected her memory of the night. I don't know if that had some kind of bad interaction with what we've been drinking. We had been having wine earlier, and whatever she'd had before I got there. So, I mean, I'm not here to say that she's lying about her memory, but I don't know why she's not remembering something which, I clearly do.
Okay, so I was actually wondering about your memory when I had asked about one position to the next. I just didn't know if it was the passage of time, the alcohol you had consumed, some other factors. Why was it that you are not able to remember some of that information very clearly?
I mean, the information about how she got in the bed next to me, or
Yeah, you had referenced that you couldn't remember exactly.
to be honest, is probably wasn't something I focused very strongly on. We're talking a matter of seconds, over a situation which, again, I thought we were doing something that was amazing. It was the accumulation for me, from my perspective, of our relationship over months, and I just thought we were having this wonderful encounter, and um, the I can't say that I've had a lot of sex with people, but you don't really focus on how quickly someone moves around the bed necessarily in that context. It
Okay.
happened.
Okay. Let me see. And earlier, in response to one of the other panelists' questions, you had talked about removing, helping each other remove pants, and then you were in bed, and you had said that kind of that situation led to underwear coming off. What about, like, did you remove the complainant's underwear? Did she remove her own underwear? How can you walk me through that part a little bit more?
Yes. From what I recall from that night, when we got into bed, there was kissing, touching. I believe we kind of moved her bra together in terms of, as things progressed, and then after it had been removed for a little while, I think we both kind of mutually sort of pulled at each other's underwear, pulled it down, and helped sort of remove it so we could keep going forward with what we were doing.
Okay. Okay. Did you ever talk to Aubrey about the feelings that you had developed for her? And kind of a second part to that question, did you sense that those feelings were reciprocated by Aubrey?
I never talked to her about it. I mean, I can be a bit shy myself in terms of talking about my emotions. I talked to it with another friend of mine, how I was feeling, and I kind of had asked her to be kept kind of private as well. But we had a growing friendship. Definitely went from being like, hey, we're in the same math club together, to hanging out a lot together. We're both from Chicago. We both like the same movies, games, books. We spent a lot of time together, and I think in the process we also got a lot more comfortable with each other. And so I in my mind, at least, I thought she was developing feelings beyond friendship for me, but I never felt comfortable sharing, quite yet how I felt. And when she kissed me, and that on the futon, I thought that, wow, so I'm not crazy. She has been sort of sending me signals, and she does want to be more than friends. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
The second part was if you sensed that the feelings were reciprocated, the romantic feelings.
Yeah, that night, before that night, I just knew that we were getting closer. Like I said, being very familiar with each other, more physical contact, hanging out more, doing more things together. But on that night particularly, we were on the futon watching the show on Netflix, and she was sort of being kind of a little bit more being kind of flirty with me in terms of really acting like she was interested in me. She was pretending to hit me and leaning against me, touching her leg to mine. And then before everything started, she touched my thigh with her hand and then gave me this look that preceded us kissing for the first time. So I felt like she indicated that she was interested in me as more than a friend, and she showed me that by her physical actions.
Okay. And you just mentioned that she touched your thigh with her hand. Did she touch it with her hand or her feet? Can you clarify that? That may be a little bit different than what was in the investigative report.
I mean, from my memory, I know she had touched my leg with her leg, but I think after that she put her hand on my leg.
Okay. Can you describe that some more for us? What did that look like?
And it wasn't anything super gratuitous or anything. It was she just rested her hand on my thigh. And I mean, and maybe I'm not like a very touchy person or be around to touch people, but generally you don't just touch other people's thighs. It's kind of more of a private area, more intimate area, I guess you could say. So
Okay.
she sort of rested her hand on my thigh as she was leaning against me on the futon.
Okay. Okay. I think my last question may be, can you talk to us about the impact that this incident has had on you since then?
It's been hard. It's kind of a cascading effect of sort of self-doubt, and that, like I said, I saw Aubrey as a best friend, and then a romantic partner, and then for 12 hours or so everything seemed perfect, and then the next day she shared that she felt like I'd taken advantage of her, and which I would, and that that I'd hurt her. Never in my life would hurt her. And then I get told I was being investigated for a violation of Title IX, and it's just it's make me feel awful in terms of that Aubrey felt that she needed to go this path, that she felt that I had hurt her in this manner, which I would never do. And it's affected my ability to focus on classes. I had to drop a class or two because it's just been weighing down on me so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Philip, I think those are all the questions I have. Did Liz or Foster have any additional questions?
I did have one more question.
Okay.
You previously had talked about, her being on top of you. So when she was on top of you, if you can recall, was she kind of doing the movements herself, or were you the one performing the majority of those, the movements during the encounter?
It was mutual. She was moving and I was moving. I mean, she would lean down and kiss me, and I'd kiss her back. It was definitely not one-sided.
Thank you for answering that.
Okay. That concludes the panel's questions. Next up would be cross-examination by the complainant's advisor, Julia. I think it might be a good time to take a few minutes before we start in on those questions. So everyone will go into their breakout rooms and then we will reconvene. Okay, we are back on the record at 2:28 with the recording going. Julia, as the complainant's advisor, the floor is yours for any questions that you have for the respondent.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Philip. I have a few questions about your statement. And the first one is, you had written that you knew that Aubrey had been drinking, but she was not drunk. Could you explain a little bit how you knew she had been drinking?
She told me.
And did she tell you how much she had had to drink or how recently she had been drinking?
I think she told me she knows she'd been drinking when Steven was there, but she didn't tell me how much she'd been drinking.
Okay. And did she seem, I know you mentioned that she was not slurring her words and that she was steady on her feet. Did she seem to have a demeanor that was different than usual, maybe more peppy or more extroverted? Did she seem different in any way?
She seemed like her usual self. I mean, like I noted, she seemed to be a little bit more interested in me, you know, like I said, in terms of her actions toward me that as the evening progressed. So like I said, different in terms of, I'm interested in you, different, but not different in terms of, should I question her capacitation or anything of that nature? No.
Okay. And I believe you both mentioned at one point during the evening, you drank a couple of shots. I guess, did you bring over the alcohol to Aubrey's apartment, to her dorm?
I brought over some wine, I think, some white wine, because it's my favorite. But I think
Okay.
Aubrey had the shots.
Okay. And how did you both come to drink the shots? Did one of you suggest that you drink?
I think it was part of our mutual plan to have some drinks while we watched the Netflix show. Just to kind of have something to drink while you watch something that was silly.
Okay. And do you typically take shots while you're watching a movie?
I think we've kind of exhausted the discussion about the drinking. They've already kind of said this is typical. I don't know the relevance of the questions.
Julia, do you have any response to that objection?
Well, what I'm trying to get at is whether it's relevant, whether he had any intent of incapacitating her. And that's why I think it's relevant to continue with this.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I will provide a bit of leeway for another question or two to try to get to what you're asking, if maybe you can phrase it more pointedly towards that.
Sure. Did you hope that in light of what you've characterized as kind of an increasingly friendly and maybe flirty relationship, that by doing some shots and drinking wine, that it might help things progress in that direction towards having a romantic relationship, or might help her loosen up or things like that?
No, and like I said, I had no expectations about that happening that night. The night started like it had before multiple times in the past, where we just hang out together. Yeah, that's just not true.
Okay. Then you proceeded to describe how when you were on the futon together, she became flirty with you. Did she say anything that you would characterize as flirty?
Not really. I mean, it's more of how she was physically interacting with me.
Okay. And then at one point you progressed from being on the futon to going into the bedroom. During that progression of time, do you recall her saying anything to you?
No, I mean, we were kissing and touching and everything in that time period. There wasn't much conversation.
Okay. Let me just see if I have any more questions. I think that's all that I have for today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the cross-examination by the complainant's advisor. Does anyone need a break before we continue? Seeing none, okay. Philip, do you have any witnesses you would like to call?
I don't have any witnesses.
Okay. What about any additional evidence that you would like the hearing panel to consider?
I don't have any additional evidence either.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. The next section we have is for the investigator. Heidi Shearer was the investigator in this case. Heidi will now be available to answer any questions of the hearing panel. The investigator may then be subject to cross-examination by the advisor of the complainant, followed by the advisor of the respondent. So Julia and then Mindy. Does the hearing panel first have any questions for Heidi?
I don't know if it's for Heidi, but I do have a question
Okay,
in regards to the respondent's questioning. He had stated something that drew my
Okay.
attention. So
okay. Well,
the
hold on. Let's
yeah.
maybe take a pause. And we can chat as a panel with our advisor
Okay.
and then figure out what we're gonna do next. Okay.
Okay.
We will take a brief recess, just a couple minutes. It is 2:35. Okay, it is 2:38. And the panel discussed, we actually just have a quick follow-up question for Philip. Point of clarification before we move on to the investigator. So Philip, you had stated in your testimony here today that you brought the wine with you to Aubrey's room. In the investigative report, in her statements, Aubrey had stated that you brought vodka and she had the wine. Can you clarify which is which for us?
I mean, I pretty sure I brought the wine because it was white wine, and that's I like it better than red wine, which she prefers. And we didn't even drink the whole bottle even. But yeah, for my recollection, I brought the wine and she had the vodka already.
Okay. And you mentioned that the bottle wasn't empty. How much would you say was left after you finished drinking? The two of you finished?
We both had about 2 glasses, so maybe a third or fourth was left.
Okay. Okay. And Aubrey, I might want to ask you the same question in terms of just give you a chance if you'd like to respond, just to clarify what alcohol you provided versus what the respondent provided, and in addition, how much wine you remember, if you remember any being left.
Yeah, I would be glad to answer that question. I would stick with what I told the investigator. I recall that Philip brought over the vodka. I already had the wine in my room, and we did drink both. I think a couple shots of the vodka, and I don't specifically recall how much wine I consumed myself, but I know that the next day, maybe when I looked at it, there was maybe like I don't know how to describe it, like an inch. I don't even think it would have been a whole glass worth left in the bottle.
Okay. All right. Any additional follow-up questions for the parties at this time? Okay, perfect. Okay, so thank you very much, Aubrey and Philip. Heidi, turning back to you as the investigator in this matter. Does the hearing panel have any questions for the investigator? Okay, seeing none, I do not have any questions either as the hearing officer. So moving on to the complainant's advisor. Julia, do you have any questions for Heidi as the investigator?
No, I don't.
Okay. And Mindy, as the respondent's advisor, do you have any questions for Heidi as the investigator?
No, I don't.
Okay. Heidi, do you have any witnesses that you wish to call?
No, I do not.
Okay. Next will be the close of the record. This concludes the hearing. The hearing panel will now deliberate in private without anyone else present except for legal counsel to the hearing panel. The hearing panel is instructed to disregard any statement or testimony of any individual who did not appear today and submit to cross-examination. That includes witness Macy White. The panel shall not rely on any statement made by Ms. White in reaching its determination of responsibility. We also will not make any inference about her inability or lack of appearance here today. The hearing panel will determine whether Philip Pfizer, the respondent, is responsible for violating university policy. If so, we will determine sanctions and remedial measures, if any. The hearing panel will reach a decision after deliberations, and I will prepare a written determination reflecting the decision of the hearing panel regarding responsibility and sanctions and any remedial measures. Coordinator within 5 business days of the end of deliberations. If necessary, deviations from this 5-day period will be communicated to you along with an expected time of completion. The Title IX coordinator will provide the written determination to the parties simultaneously within 5 business days after receipt of the written determination. Both parties will have the right to appeal the decision. If you have any questions about the Title IX resolution process or this hearing, please contact Heidi Shearer, the investigator in this matter. I will ask Heidi to move everyone to their respective breakout rooms. You are free to remain in your breakout rooms to speak with your advisor, or you may leave at any time, as the hearing is now concluded. I thank everyone for taking the time to be here today. The time is approximately 2:43 p.m. and we are off the record.